Hello. Hi, good afternoon. Welcome. My name is Jennifer Comer, and I'm the director of the Young Writers Awards. And before this afternoon's session with Kwame and Kimiko, we have a very special presentation for you. So the Charleston Literary Festival's Young Writers Awards is now in its second year of the program and has doubled in size, serving 9th through 12th grade. And it serves all of the students in Charleston County Public High Schools. It has 3 categories: poetry, short story, and personal essay. If you know a teacher that would like to participate next year, please have them take a look at our website. So the awards are selected based on 3 distinct criteria: originality, skill, and emergence of personal voice. But today is very special because this is our first poetry winner. So philosopher Jung said, when writing about the power of poetry, it is a series of images in its truest sense, not an accidental juxtaposition or sequence, but a structure that is thoughtful and full of meaning and purpose. Through harnessing metaphors, imagery, and symbolism, poetry is a powerful tool for emerging young writers to explore and process the complexities of their life and the human experience. I will say that with this category, it was 56% of our entries this year. This afternoon, I am honored to introduce you to our first place winner, Arden Johnson. She is a freshman at Charleston School of the Arts. She's a writer, an incredible artist. I got to see some work earlier, an animator, and ever since a vulture untied her shoelace, she is also a birder. She aims one day to write and illustrate a graphic novel for the world to see. Please welcome me please help me welcome Arden to read her poem, A Poem for Fellow Vultures.
A poem for the fellow vultures. You circle the sky with your wings in slow, lazy tracings as you scout for the less fortunate. Your feathers fill my head, my pen in hand, searching for any straggling letters, leftover scraps on the skeleton of a poem. You hover over the remains of what was once alive, a corpse stripped of any value, your beak clacking like computer keys against brittle, starch-white bones. I pile my poems from the rib cages of rough drafts to the spine of the metaphor holding up the little details that flow through the sticky blood of my words. You scrap and struggle for what remains of your reputation, as we poets do, but we got opposite ends of the issue, I suppose. And here I sit, picking the words from the bones of my writing, trying to unknot the shoelace tangle of ideas you have left in my brain, when really, all I am is a vulture, doing my best, though it may be hidden under the flesh of fancy words, to recycle the messy drafts of roadkill and allow my poems to grow. Let us do the world's dirty work. Let you circle, and I write. Thank you.
Arden Johnson, everyone, Charleston School of the Arts, 14 years old. Let's get a round of applause for Arden. I would like to take a moment to thank the sponsors of this event, the Galvani family. And please also, if you have your cell phone on you, take it out now, turn it off. My name is Deja Moore, and along with Latreia Graham, I am one of Charleston Literary Festival's inaugural Cato Fellows. Yay. A poet myself, I am delighted to be continuing the day's focus on incredible, moving language, kicked off just a couple hours ago by the inimitable Nikki Giovanni. With us now are 3 poets and personal inspirations whose work teaches us to look closely and listen: Kwame Dawes, Kimiko Hahn, and Marjory Wentworth. Kwame Dawes is the author of numerous books of poetry and other books of fiction, criticism, and essays. His most recent collection is Sturgetown, published in 2023. Dawes is the winner of many awards and accolades, including the prestigious Wyndham Campbell Award for Poetry, and he was a finalist for the 2022 Neustadt International Prize for Literature. In 2022, Dawes was awarded the Order of Distinction Commander Class by the government of Jamaica. He is the current Poet Laureate of Jamaica. He also has strong ties to South Carolina as an advocate for poetry, as an educator, and in 2009, he was inducted into the South Carolina Academy of Authors in recognition of his extraordinary contributions to the poetic arts in the state. Kimiko Hahn is author of 10 collections of poetry, including The Ghost Forest, New and Selected Poems, published in 2024. In 2023, Kimiko was named a Chancellor for the Academy of American Poets, an honor she actually shares with Kwame Dawes, who's a Chancellor Emeritus. She also received the Poetry Foundation's Ruth Lilly Lifetime Achievement Award. Additional honors include a Guggenheim Fellowship, Penn Volcker Award, Shelley Memorial Prize, Theodore Rothko Memorial Poetry Prize, American Book Award, and NEA Fellowships. Hahn is a distinguished professor in the MFA program in Creative Writing and Literary Translation at Queens College, the City University of New York. Finally, we have our two poets in conversation with Marjory Wentworth, who is the New York Times bestselling author of Out of Wonder, Poems Celebrating Poets, with Kwame Alexander and Chris Colderly. She has published many books of poetry, and her latest, One River, One Boat, was published just a few months ago by Charleston's own Evening Post Press. Wentworth served as the Poet Laureate of South Carolina from 2003 to 2020, and is the co-writer of We Are Charleston, Tragedy and Triumph at Mother Emanuel with Herb Fraser and Dr. Bernard Powers. Marjory continues to be indispensable to literary life in this state, and in 2021, she received the South Carolina Governor's Awards for the Arts. Another round of applause for these three wonderful poets.
All right, well, thanks for coming out. Today is Poetry Day at the Charleston Literary Festival. So what we're going to do is kind of have a conversation that will sort of mix poetry with our conversation, because I really want you to hear some of their work, and otherwise we won't get that opportunity. So we're excited to be here, and our panel is called Fortunate Travelers. So I thought I'd start the conversation by, just kind of talking about international themes are embodied in your work and your life, and why, and then maybe read a poem that kind of embodies that. Because you are fortunate travelers. It's funny, when I got this topic, the first thing I did was remember that Kwame just been named Poet Laureate of Jamaica, and saw on social media that you were actually in Japan at the time, so it's very fitting. So let's just start with talking about that.
That title, that name is, it's Derek Walker, one of Derek Walker's collections called The Fortunate Traveler. Yeah. I don't know if everybody wants to be intimately associated with with everything about Derek, but I think in this one thing is the attitude of gratitude, the sense that having moved from place to place, the good fortune is to land in a place and be met there and be welcomed there. And I think being back in South Carolina reminds me again and again that very rapidly after we arrived here in about 1992, we were in Sumter, South Carolina. We were welcomed by the black community there in ways that cannot be taken for granted, because I'm a person of the African diaspora. I was born in Ghana, grew up in Jamaica, and there is an element that sometimes African people in America do not necessarily immediately want to associate with the African American life and tradition for complicated reasons. But that was not part of my upbringing and my understanding of it. And one of the things that was transformative for me was the welcome that the African American community gave to me coming through. So I regarded myself then, and continue to regard myself, as a very fortunate traveler to have landed here. And I'll say one last thing, we went, I remember the first early days, we went to St. Helena's Island and got lost. And I know, how do you get lost on? It's just one road. We were going to the Penn Center, and so we stopped at a convenience store, and I walked in and I started asking for directions. And I started to get a little annoyed because I felt they were mocking my accent, because people were talking back with me and saying things like, oh no, and so on. And I said, what is going on in this place? How rude are these people? So I go in the car and I tell my wife, I don't know if we can live here. These people are just rude. They just keep mocking me. So we get to the Penn Center and there's a recording of Gullah. And I went, oh my God.
Oh, wow.
There's no mockery there at all. But that was symptomatic of my sense of being at home and being welcomed in this place. So for me, it's just a beautiful, beautiful moment. So that's what I would say. I'm very fortunate to have traveled here. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we're fortunate to have you. When's the last time you were?
In
South, because you started your trip. You went to Columbia and then Sumter. So you've been sort of retracing your.
Yeah. So we lived in Sumter first, then moved to Columbia. Lived there. We are here for about 20 years, and then we now live in Nebraska. But I come here all the time. Some of my dearest friends.
Well, we miss you.
Yeah, I know. I miss South Carolina. Some things, of course.
Not everything.
Let's not get carried away now.
Yeah.
Well, I've been thinking about the theme bestowed upon us, and I think that we're all international poets.
Yeah.
So that's one of my first thoughts. As far as me personally, I'm mixed. My mother's family was from Japan. They immigrated to Hawaii, and they worked in the fields. And my father is mostly German American. He was about fourth, fifth generation, and he grew up in Milwaukee. So I'm quite mixed as far as that goes. I look more Asian American than I do German American, and also growing up in the 60s and 70s and so forth, I very much identified with that side of myself, as well as identifying with my mother's side. My father, too, was very interested in Asian art, so although he was the Caucasian side of the family, if you will, a lot of our culture, my sister and I learned a lot about Asian culture because of my father, whereas my mother, because of the war, she had in part rejected, and then went back to her love for Japanese culture. So it very complicated in terms of the way one looks, how one is treated. I've been asked for my green card. I've been asked how long I've been here. So the way I face the world, the way the world has faced and treated me. Sometimes it's a pleasure to be the Asian American writer in a reading, and sometimes it feels window dressing. But that's the complexity of what it is for me, and I think for a lot of writers, if not most writers, depending on where they find themselves and how much they really look into where their place is in the world. My book before this one, Foreign Bodies, started out with that title because foreign bodies are actually objects that are removed from bodies. That's a foreign body. And then as I was putting the collection together, I thought, you really should write some poems that have to do with other kinds of foreign bodies. So I wrote about my mother and immigration and so forth. So I wanted to look at different kinds of foreign bodies and what that might mean. We could talk for a couple hours on this, but I'll
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I guess I would love to hear maybe a poem that sort of embodies something about that identity that we were talking about. That you it would be a different poem if that wasn't who you were, if that makes sense. And maybe you could each share a poem. Yeah. Sure. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Good timing?
Yeah,
Okay.
that'll work. I think I'll read a poem called Recall, because it ties a lot of things in. I think I wrote this in South Carolina. I wrote it when I was here, early days. So Sturgetown is about memory. Sturgetown is my ancestral village in Jamaica on my father's side. And so it becomes a kind of symbolic representation of this idea of roots and sort of a contemplation on home and multiple homes. So here's a poem called Recall. Reggae's insinuating bass line cleaves to my bloodline. All is quiet under southern skies. Tomorrow I will go blind for what I have not seen. It's a price I must pay. Tomorrow my last laugh will scatter over the dry leaves of live oaks shedding. I've heard no ragamuffin in months, and I've forgotten the role of my waistline, the offbeat skank. It is like grief, this emptying, this silence, waiting for the rush of stones. I'm dreaming now in a smooth southern drawl, and we have found the muddied bodies, eye sockets and teeth dragged from the swamp by FBI agents in their clean white shirts and walkie-talkies. The reeds are unmoved. They swing back in place like rubber. Been watching too much Mississippi Burning and Eyes on the Prize. Still, it's true that they lynched someone in Florence a month ago. On the roadside, a rusting Cadillac, once green, now chewing grass sloppily from its gaping windows, and bullet-riddled skin ticks in the heat. I'm dreaming in blue notes, gospel calling, responding, sing talking, yes, swing talking my way to salvation. Oh, pipe me back to my familiar earth, for it's slipping slowly from me.
Thank you. Beautiful.
Thank you.
You may have heard of the poet Terence Hayes, who invented a wonderful form called the golden shovel. And I'm going to read two very short golden shovels. And these are poems. A golden shovel is a poem where you take a whole poem or you take a line and you make that whole line, every word from that, the last word of each of your own lines. And it's sometimes easier just to hear it. So I decided I want to try my hand at golden shovels, but I didn't want a long poem or a long line. So I looked to haiku. So this first one is a haiku by the Japanese poet Yosa Buson, and his haiku is, "The whale already taken, got away, the moon alone." My poem is "The Whale Already." What is endangered, the rest of us ignore. The whale, adored by children and cartoonists, already dwindles. Even bycatch has taken them. The tiny creatures they consume haven't got a chance to outlast the warming. A way to safeguard whales is to deny ourselves the car and its exhaust. The moon sees us at any cost, alone. So a lot of the poems, the Golden Shovels I've been writing, use either Japanese haiku or haiku by my favorite American haiku writer, Richard Wright, who wrote over 1,000 of them several years before he died. So his haiku is, "Follow wherever the tree branches make arches in the torrid sun." And my poem is, "Follow Wherever." In bedtime stories, a girl or girls must follow instructions, or the wind, wherever the concrete, the invisible, or the voice, like that of a tree, leads her. She walks a path until it branches, then halts, fancies she'll make a choice because choice isn't foretold. She arches her back, then her eyebrows. She finds herself in a clearing where animals badger. The possum says, "Light can be torrid, the moonlight more than the sun."
Thank you. I love that. Yeah. Aren't you glad to hear some of their poetry, right? It's just fantastic. I just want to mention that Terrence Hayes lives in New York now. He teaches at NYU, but he's also from South Carolina. Didn't he grow up in Columbia?
Yeah, he went to Spring Valley High.
Went to Spring Valley High, there you go. Great poet. And it's interesting, in Kimiko's book, there's a group of those poems, and the last word is actually in bold, so you can see it, and they're just.
Kimiko went crazy with the golden
She
shovel.
went crazy. She went crazy. She does.
You don't know the half of it.
Yeah, but it's.
But I love them because what you do with it is you almost create. You could do it sort of dutifully, but when you hear the words then echoing back, you're actually exploring deeper into the haikus and
they're amazing.
It's wonderful. They're
just. And how many of them?
Like a million.
A million.
Yeah, which means you only get like 10, but there are a million.
There are a million. But it's interesting you mentioned, I love Richard Wright's haiku, and people often don't know of them. And his name came up this morning as well with Nikki Giovanni. And, when I love teaching his haiku, people, Richard Wright wrote haiku. I'm like, they're like amazing. Absolutely. So thank you for that. So there's so much to talk about. We could go on and on. But one of the other things I was thinking about is we're all about the same age, and you both also write a lot of poems about family. I think you both have two daughters. Two daughters, and Kwame, you also have a son.
Yeah.
Kwame and I were talking yesterday. We are so ready to have grandchildren, and we, so we're all about it. But you've written a number of poems to your daughters about your I don't know, and I thought it'd be really interesting to kind of hear from both of you about that, because they're really wonderful. You both have a few scattered in your new books, and I don't know. That'd be nice to. I don't have a daughter, so I want to hear these poems. So. Of all sons.
Well, I'll just say, for starters, obviously, I am a daughter, and I have daughters, and now I have a granddaughter and a grandson. So, and in my family, there were only two girls. I had 2 daughters, so just 2 girls. And so there's a sense of being surrounded by the subject matter as well as being a daughter. And the little poem that I read actually talks about a daughter. So I look at daughters as archetypes, and Kwame talks a lot about mythology and archetypes. So I look at them as, and Nikki Giovanni was talking about fairy tales. So fairy tales and archetypes. So I look at the daughter as being a kind of archetype, a figure, but also one that I have been, that I am, that I've been involved with, that I've been involved with raising. So I look at all different aspects. One of my poems, actually, I was the oldest of 2, and sibling rivalry, at least for me, like that little cute little baby just born, which is a main theme of mine, actually, that rivalry. So one of my poems called 2 Sisters, I tried to actually look at it having both the older daughter and younger daughter inside me. So I try and actually look at what that might be like, both those archetypes of older and younger inside me. So I try and look at the image of the daughter as both biographical but also in a wider abstract way.
Do you want to read a poem? No, you don't have to. Let's hear Kwame.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, well, I will read while Kimiko is looking for that poem, which I remember that poem.
Yeah.
Yeah, and anyway. This is a poem called It Begins with Silence. You know, I've been fascinated by this idea of writing. So, you know, we've introduced it as I'm writing about my children and so on. And it's a generous way of describing what is essentially a poem about me. And it always is about us as poets, even though our subject is external to us. And in a sense, what we are enacting is the us in them and the them in us. And I think that dynamic is important to be upfront about. And so there's something profoundly unfair about this poem that I'm going to read, because I'm confronting them with my aging, and they didn't ask for any of that crap. So here's the poem. It begins with silence, and it's for 2 incredible women, Senna and Ekwa. There's an epigraph from Dana Rothberg which says, "The womb of the woman is the universe, the dark space where all things begin and get completed." My daughters, I will save you the trouble of finding words for that meeting in the darkness, of my eyes not discerning you, my gentle request that you take my hands to your faces to trace a memory of love, the smile, the giggle in the shape of your lips. My daughters, perhaps this will be the register of the dark and light of last meetings, those repeated again and again. And you will, I hope, walk into a long dusk and light, perfect in its tenderness. Your ordinary mundane conversations about money, vacations, work, your brother, your mother's anticipated questions. This poem, I hope, will save you the scent of my body decaying, the things I will keep about me, the forgiveness perhaps of what you will know and not know before you separate, drive towards your own futures. On my walks, I am carrying you in my head the mantra of wished for things, the prayer for your laughter to never end, but to grow and grow in the soft depth of contentment and tenderness, the tenderness of your delight in open skies, the way you return to the womb of belonging, that you will know the persistence of being loved, the art of family, remembering the dates, the anniversaries, the absurd details, the lies we treat as games, knowing that lies of deepest wounding are healed in the shadow of wombs, the unreachable places that make the beginning and end. It begins with silence. It begins with water. It begins with shadow. Thank you.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Most of my new poems in this new and selected are actually written in forms. I was just, as an aside, speaking of being around the same age, so when I was growing up, I was a hippie. And I was not going to write in forms. That was bourgeois. So, you know, fast forward decades, I'm just writing in forms, so better late than never. It took me about 20 years to write a decent sestina. Not that I was trying every year, but it just, they're hard.
They're hard. Yeah.
So this is a sestina,
Yeah.
and it repeats 6 words: daughter, ships, right, left, safe, and whale. To be a daughter and to have a daughter can forecast at odds relationships, especially when the mother hazards to write on her own hours, O-U-R-S. What time's left while keeping the baby safe from herself as she and the baby wail. With the vacuum, she and the baby wail, one in the crib, the other on the floor to wail with the vacuum cleaner. So the daughter can't hear mama drowning. So the new relationship isn't all arithmetic and geometry, all right angles, barely connecting. What is left at dusk, still tender and safe, you couldn't pluck and lock in a safe, not unlike a girl calf and her mama whale. 2 generations of breaching daughters, applauded by tourists on a ship, but more lightly, if they are right whales, or what species are left of those docile equatorial pods, never left by men hunting their fat. They are not safe. Larger than grays, smaller than blue whales, the very buoyant mother and son or daughter enjoy a year-long relationship unless whalers spy these right whales to hunt. Funny, given the mariner's right to trick a man to think he'd been left for the sharks without the safety of pity or prayer. Then that whaler would wail for his own mother, wife, or daughter. When it comes to daughter-mother relationships, I've written on both till there's nothing left without breaching safety, without whaling. After all, I love daughters and I love ships.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, we're switching topics here, but you know, I've noticed, I've been at a few events at the Laureate Festival, and we all are very anxious about this week. And I just would love to hear you both talk about how poetry just speaks to the zeitgeist and kind of where we are right now. I know it's a big, big topic, but you can kind of take it however you'd like. I'd forgotten that you were both chancellors in the Academy of American Poets, so you can really kind of speak about this with your own work or just American poetry today. I'd love to hear you talk about that.
I mean, you know, I always say that, the question is often asked, what's the point of poetry and what do poets do? And for me, the role of poetry is sharpened by the historical context in which we think of knowledge, understanding, intelligence, and presence, the existence. And one of the fascinating questions is the question of erasure. You wrote, Kimiko talks about the idea of erasure. And I have a quarrel with erasure poems, which is academic in many ways, but it's also, I think, it's built on an idea that of the absences of voice that have been under the, that has taken place under colonialism and imperialism and so on, the silencing of whole cultures. And in a funny kind of way, I then push back on the idea of erasure and say, no, what we should be doing is just making more noise rather than sort of
taking it away.
And it's kind of funny. I'm being a bit facetious, but I mention this because I've really come to the view that poets are the chronicles of the sentiment of their time. And the chronicling is an expression of the bodies of people with feelings, their humanity, being present in the moment. And one of the atrocities of slavery, colonialism, and systems of oppression is to erase that existing humanity by silencing the voice of the artists and the poets and so on. So for me, the poet, being able to write and publish by being able to retain that it stays in the world beyond themselves, represents an act of resistance. And what they say is political by it being said. And I don't mean this facetiously or even lightly. So we are in a moment, of course, but we are in a moment that will be, in 100 years' time, reviewed and engaged. And the question is, whose voice will be there in the articulation and the expression, and whose presence will be there in the imagination of people? Because so often we absent whole bodies of people because we've silenced them over time. And so this is why I think poets should write in the moment. And if somebody says, do I write political poems? My question to them is, are you political? Because if you're not, then don't write political poems, because I don't know what the hell you'll be writing. Write you, write your soul, write your heart, write your presence, write your complication, because that left thing, that gift that you leave, will resonate your existence, your people's existence, your presence, your imagination, your body's presence in the world. For me, that is most fundamental. It may go to hell on Tuesday, but where is the voice that is going to tell that story? To me, that's what the poet is about. For me, that becomes highly important.
I mean, you just said it all. I'll just add, I guess, brief, more anecdotal comments, and that is, I was born in the 50s, and for me, and I know that a lot of women my generation, and actually current young women too, really, so for me, to be a good girl was to sit down and be quiet. And to be angry or show anger was being a bad girl. So for me to express rage, that was being a bad girl. And for me to do that is, in essence, a political act. Because I am resisting that kind of silencing on a very personal but also cultural level. And that, that's just a small story that can be told in many different ways, right? And then the only other more also personal comment. So I remember years ago, I don't even know if I had a book out yet, and I was reading poems, and at one point reading at a benefit for homeless people, unhoused people. And I remember thinking, well, should I write a poem about being homeless? And I thought, well, screw you, you've never been homeless. Why are you trying to, which doesn't mean you can't try. But I thought, I'm gonna read a love poem, because to have privacy when you're unhoused, there's no room for intimacy. So I read a love poem, so it was looking to see what I already had. And poets have platforms. If someone is reading in this context, we can say something. We can say resist. We can say don't go for authoritarian people running for president.
You're so tactful.
We have a platform too, so we can read anything, but we can also say things as part of our patter.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So different ways to approach
Different ways
politics.
to approach it. That's really interesting. I love that anecdote. Beautiful anecdote. So we only have a few more minutes before we're going to take Q&A from the audience, and I'd love it if you'd both just sort of read one more, maybe short poem. So I don't know. Makes my job easier. No, I'm only kidding. I just love hearing their work, and I just love it. So, maybe just something that maybe your favorite from your book, or something that really speaks to the moment.
Favorite? I don't know about that.
While you're looking, I'll read. Okay.
Good. Perfect.
So this is a poem, as I said, when I was putting together my collection, Foreign Bodies, I wanted to think about my grandmother's body, but also immigrant bodies. So this poem is written after reading an article, I think it was from the New York Times. And someone at a dinner asked me if I write occasional poems, meaning poems written for a particular occasion. A daughter, after being asked if I write the occasional poem. After leaving Roxruja, after crossing Mexico with a coyote, after reaching at midnight that barren New Mexico border, a man and his daughter looked to Antelope Wells for asylum and were arrested. After forms read in Spanish to the Mayan-speaking father, after a cookie but no water, after the wait for the lone bus to return for their turn, after boarding, after the little girl's temperature spiked, she suffered 2 heart attacks, vomited, and stopped breathing. After medics revived the 7-year-old at Lordsburg Station, after she was flown to El Paso, where she died, the coroner examined the failed liver and swollen brain. Then Jacqueline's chest and head were stitched up, and she returned to Guatemala in a short white coffin to her mother, grandparents, and dozens of women preparing tamales and beans to feed the grieving. In Quechua, W-E means mouth.
Beautiful. So I thought I'd read a poem for my wife, Lorna, because, one does. This is a poem called February Light. And there's a video that was done by Aniwa Botchie, who is a Ghanaian filmmaker, and she did a beautiful film based on this. I think it's available on YouTube, or maybe it's doing the festivals now. But here's the poem, February Light, for Lorna. The sky offers a brief, mellow smile, a calm pewter assurance, the gentle backdrop against which the annual death of the sycamore suggests the priest instrument of blessing, the aromatic twigs bundled and dipped in oil, to spray the gathered congregants, or a couple, distracted by the fear of a new beginning, their awkward bodies learning to consider coupling. This wash of morning sunlight will pass quickly enough for them to remark at the light of their days. Can you see that? Yes, it's beautiful. This is it. Communion in the grace of the earth's occasional beauty. Thank you.
That's like a prayer, Kwame.
Thank you.
Beautiful. All right. I think we have time to take some questions from the audience, and
Or else we'll just keep talking.
Or we talk forever.
That's right.
There's wonderful. Oh, there we go. So we'll wait till you get the mic, and you could ask a general question or specific, whatever.
Check. Okay.
Check.
Didn't work yesterday. with 3 lifetimes of poets sitting in front of me, I would love to ask, what would you tell yourself if you were younger? Because I don't know if y'all all, grew up knowing, hey, I want to be a poet, or in high school, like myself, as like, oh, poetry's fun, something I do in my spare time. What is, again, to try and distill your entire lifetimes into a saying, what advice would you give yourself if you could talk to your younger self?
Good question.
I did always want to write poetry. I think it's because I can't say always, but I was always enamored and captivated by language, even if I didn't understand the words. So playing with language was very important to me from the time I was very little, before I could write. And you can see that I love to play with language. So I would just say play more.
I wouldn't say anything about poetry. To be honest, we would talk about things like, maybe you should talk to your dad while he's still alive more. And it's not that we didn't talk, but I think then I would say, ask him everything before he goes. It would be that curiosity and being tempted to ask questions or to do things and not doing them. That's what I would talk about. Poetry and writing, I think I was going to do something like that, and it was okay. I know this is a classic question to say, what would you say to your, your childhood self and so on. And frankly, I wouldn't have much profound to say to that that kid. I would be saying things like, if you wore your glasses more, you could have played cricket, and been playing for the West Indies, you idiot. All right? Because of your pride, you don't want to wear the glasses, and then look at you. You can't even barely see now. That's because you didn't do that. That's the kind of thing I would be talking to that self about. So I know this is not the kind of answer you're looking for, but that's the truth.
Cricket not being a very popular American sport, but I guess what I would say is to take that part of yourself more seriously than anything else. I mean, my regret is that I didn't do that. I was so worried about making a living because I just did things in my own life. My dad died when I was young, and my mother wasn't really able to support us, and I was just, so worried about how do you do this thing that it's not even, how do we quantify poetry, right? And I wish if I could go back, I wouldn't worry as much about that, because I think it works out in the end, and you find a way to support yourself. But I think it's hard, like you were saying, you could just write poetry when you feel like it, and I think if you can center your life around it when you're young, you'll follow that direction, and that would be my advice. Because what do you have to lose, really, right? Yeah. Okay. Oh, down here. Yeah.
Oh, there's a question in the front.
Outside voice?
Oh no, what is it?
I think both of you, or all of you, have exemplified what Nikki Giovanni said. There was a young person that asked who she wrote for. Mm-hmm. In other words, who was her target audience? And she answered with, itself. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think what we've heard, further exemplifies that. But she also spoke about what you do when either you experience something or witness something that is so traumatic. And do you write about it then, or what do you do with it? And she said, if you can't write about it then, you put it off, because you will come to a point where you can write about it. And I've read both Kwame's poem titled Sorrow, in Surgetown, okay, and the poem Perpetual Sorrow in Toxic Flora. And both of you enter into that space of sorrow in a little bit different way.
yeah.
So I wondered if you could talk about that, how you deal with, you know, emotional trauma when it comes to writing a poem.
When my mother died very suddenly in a car accident, I was in my late 30s. And because of my writing practice where I write a lot, I immediately started writing about what I was going through. And then a friend who knew my work said, "Really, you've always been writing about missing your mother," which is true. So in a way, it was a continuation of that sorrow and kind of missing her, or missing a connection with her. My dear friend Cornelius Eady, when his parent died, he waited about a year before he could write about his father's death. So I think we just, we do different things. But I totally love what Nikki Giovanni said, and that is, you know, there'll come a time when you have more access to writing about that, but I wouldn't say don't write about it or you have to write about it. You just leave yourself open and give yourself permission, I think.
I agree with that. I mean, for me, writing is a shelter, you know. I really don't enter writing poetry to war. I run to it, and I find shelter in it. It teaches me what I'm thinking. It teaches me what I'm feeling. So I've never sort of had that idea that poetry becomes a way to deal with trauma. I don't trust that. I mess around too much for that to be like consistently true. But I do know that that remaining open in myself as a poet and vulnerable as a poet is good for poetry, and that my access to experience is a way to leave something valuable behind. We've talked about deaths of parents, and I mentioned my father, who died when I was about 21 or 22. And it took me several years to write the poems, you know, that directly related to it. But I think I was doing it. But yet it was in the moment where I found poems that sort of dealt with it, that I think I became comfortable about this idea of my voice or with the poems. I wasn't embarrassed by my poems, where before that I was embarrassed by my poems. Even though people were saying they were good, I just felt they kind of fake. So I guess it made me connect with something visceral. And the ability to use language to capture that was important. Now, could that have happened years before? I don't think so. I think I was getting better with language. And then my language was catching up to my feelings. And allowing ourselves the facility to be stronger with our language, the craft, to handle the feeling, is really one of the great opportunities that we have. So just plan your life. If you're going to have really exciting things in your life, wait until you're really good as a writer, and then let that happen. And then you're good to go.
Yeah, I think Nikki would love that. Yeah, excellent. Any other questions?
Hello.
Hi.
Hey. I have a question. So
Oh, is that me?
both of you are international poets and write in different places. When you write poems in different places, does that change your writing? Or is that just subject matter, or does something else that affects you? And I have a special question for Kimiko, that you mentioned about anger, that I am Japanese. So I was reading an article recently talking about this woman who won the case of Me Too thing in Japan. And in the article it says, Japanese women do not have the language to get angry. And I have a difficulty getting angry too, so I was kind of interested in what you think. Thank you.
Well, I'll jump into that. Japanese women, since the year 1000, have been the dominant classical voices in Japanese literature. They were shut down for a few hundred years, but they definitely have the language. They're the ones that invented, that were using the Japanese language as opposed to Chinese, which is what the men were writing in. So they definitely have the language. They may not have access, or they may not have given themselves permission to express themselves and to use that language, or to find that language that is inherently theirs. And as for writing in other voices, if I write a persona poem, if that's what you're talking about, I find something in my own life that is maybe even very small that will take me into the other person's. I try and embody that, whatever has captivated me. On the other hand, I have a very long poem called The Hemisphere, where I'm writing in different voices, and one is in the voice of an Egyptian sex worker that Flaubert visited and wrote about. And what I ultimately did was the poet's voice, had to come to terms with what gives me the right to even speak in her voice. So I tried to complicate it in that case. So I have her voice spoken through me. I have Flaubert's real voice, and then I have Kuja Khanem, the sex worker, the courtesan, saying, "Who do you think you are, tenured woman? Bourgeoisie, speaking for me, you've never been a sex worker." So I try and complicate it a little bit. So there are different ways of approaching persona.
Yeah, I think, as I was drawn to this idea of what place does with writing as well. Opportunity for me, new landscapes, new places, new voices. I mean, I'm always trying to suck in as much as possible. I'm always trying to distract myself from this through line of my own obsessions, which then allows me to complicate my obsessions. So I remember one of my mentors, Ellen R., who taught in Sumter, wonderful woman, wonderful poet, and I remember her. She called me into her office one day. She was very grumpy, and she said, "Kwame, do you know the names of the trees and the birds?" I said, "What trees and birds? Like what?" And she says, "No. Do you know the names of the?" I said, "Yeah." And I started to name Jamaica. She says, "No, here. You live here." And I said, "Okay, that's a little aggressive, but so Ellen says, "Learn the names." And I said, "How?" She says, "Learn them. Get a book. Just go learn them. Look at them. Learn them. It will make you a better poet." And I think she understood right away that if we pay attention to the landscape and the spaces that we are in and the language of it, we will have more to work with, more to draw on, more to shape our work. And I like to call it a kind of distraction from our own preoccupations, which open us to more feelings and more thoughts and other people and empathy and all those wonderful things. So new places, I think, shape me, but old places are part of the nostalgia that I think is also great fodder and food for poetry. Place shifts and bodies move, but we are still in the bodies in that place. And that I think is a beautiful thing for a poet to have.
That's wonderful. I love that. Beautiful. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Look at the time. Yeah. I don't think we have time for, I don't know. We have 35 seconds. Okay.
Hi, I'm Jasmine. Nice to, standing up, okay. Hi, I'm Jasmine. Lovely to hear y'all talk, especially about something I think is so important. I wanted to kind of tie into the end of your question there, Mr. Dawes. Recently, I came back from New York. I'm from here, not born here, but mostly I've spent my life here. And I noticed that in my time in New York, I felt like I was just writing about Charleston. And I couldn't really, being in that space, it was really productive, but I couldn't write about, New York, specifically Syracuse, because if you've been there, it's Syracuse. And also I would go to New York City and I felt like such a rush of energy, and I could really write, again, not about New York City, but about, Charleston and the places I really care about. And so to wrap this all up in a nice, neat little bow with a question mark at the end of it, I'm curious about if there are spaces that you go to that feel productive, but not in regards to specifically that place. And maybe if I just need a little bit more time before I can write about New York, or if it's like trash.
Yeah. All right.
Not that New York is trash, but anyway, thank you.
Okay, real quick.
New York may not be that interesting. But Charleston definitely
Charleston
is.
definitely.
So just keep writing.
And
I think you will move with the work. I don't think you have to dictate it.
And often you write about the place, like you said, you're not in the place, but that's when you think about it more intensely.
Absolutely.
Because you're missing it, and it's just the way it works. So.
Early days.
Early days.
Yeah, I think it goes back to an answer that Nikki Giovanni gave, and that is, when you're ready to write about New York, it will come to you.
That's right.
So
Trust that it will.
Trust it. Early
All
days.
right, we've got like red buttons flashing here.
To blow up.
But thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Sarah Moriarty. As Executive Director of Charleston Literary Festival, please thank one more time Kwame Dawes, Kimiko Hahn, and Marjory Wentworth for that wonderful, wonderful conversation. I'd just like to take this opportunity to say, first of all, Kimiko Hahn, it was wonderful to hear you say that you were all international poets. Because I think one of the things that we try to do at Charleston Literary Festival is root the local in the global and show the universality in artistic expression. And I think that this session exemplified that today. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
The second thing I'd like to say, I'd like to really underline, is that it means so much to us to have you poets on the stage with us today. So people often say that we turn to poets for inspiration, and I don't think the word inspiration quite cuts it. I'm doing away with inspiration because I believe actually that we turn to our poets for direction, and we turn to our poets to help us to understand, to help us to reach the unreachable places, to help us to face the unfathomable feelings. And to echo Kwame Dawes, we look to our poets to tell the untold stories and to build the narratives of this multifaceted and complex world that we find ourselves in. So once again, it means so much to Charleston Literary Festival to have you here with us today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I always have housekeeping too. Two things. Number one, thank you to the sponsors of this session, the Galvani family, huge supporters of Charleston Literary Festival. And our poets will be available to sign books at the bookstore, our official bookseller, Buxton Books. If you exit through the back, join the signing queue, buy lots and lots and lots and lots of copies of books to get signed for all of your friends and family. They will meet you there. Thank you very much.
Thank you.